our panel here today. We have Christine, Kelsey, and Mike joining us, who are three of our fantastic coaches. And today they are going to walk you through how to prepare for MBA interviews with former M7 admissions officers. So all three of these folks have been former admissions officers, and so they know the interview process backwards and forwards. With this QR code, you can go ahead and sign up for Leland if you do not already have an account, or you can go to joinleland.com and learn a little bit more about our services, which we will also be covering today. I'm going to pause here. This week is our MBA sprint. So essentially, we know that a lot of folks are gearing up to apply for round two, possibly even round three, or maybe you're just thinking about applying sometime in the future. We have a ton of different events for the rest of the week, both Thursday and Friday, and you'll see the calendar link over in the chat. So go ahead, click on that. You can register for any of these events. They're all free, and they highlight fantastic coaches across our MBA category who are ready to help you get into your dream schools. A couple of logistics. You are more than welcome to ask questions in the chat. We highly, highly encourage it. Our panelists will be answering. I'm happy to answer as well. So please put your questions in the chat. We ask that you be respectful to everyone on the call. Everyone is here to learn, and so we ask that everyone is respectful. And then from there, you can also sign up for Leland to access additional resources. And throughout the call, we'll be putting some links to various coach profiles and to Leland within the chat. So keep an eye there. It's a great place to access a ton of resources. As for our agenda today, we're going to get started with some introductions from our panelists. We'll do a quick welcome and an overview of Leland. Then we'll get into the meat of today, which is really our expert panel. We're going to talk about all things preparing for interviews, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up from there. So, introductions. Like I said, we have three former M7 admissions committee members here, and they're going to walk us through everything interviews. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Christine. I'll hand the mic over to you.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Balzano. I have been doing this for a really long time. I won't even bore you with how long that is. But in addition to having started out my MBA admissions career at Booth, I was on LBS's admissions team, and I'm actually currently on Yale's admissions team in a contract role across a number of their MBA programs, executive, full-time, and some of their one-year master's programs. So I wear kind of two hats. So I get to do this reading. So I'm in the midst of reading applications while also helping you guys prepare for schools. So nice to meet you all. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Christine. Mike, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Mike. I worked at the Stanford Graduate School of Business for about 17 years, including a little over a decade managing the Stanford MSX program, which is the one-year mid-career program. And in that role, I got to oversee the admissions process as well as work with the MBA admissions process.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. Kelsey.
Bringing up the rear. Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey. Nice to meet you. I'm so glad to be joined by Christine and Mike, and thank you to Alex. I was AdCom at Columbia Business School, where I sat on the final admissions committee. I managed the global interview program, so I trained alums and students in addition to interviewing a couple hundred folks every year. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much to our panelists. As you can see in the chat, there's links to each and every panelist coaching profile, so feel free to go check those out for more details about their awesome qualifications. Okay, this is your turn to interact. In the chat, we would love to hear two things. What is your dream MBA program, and when do you plan on applying? Like I said, I'm sure we have lots of folks that are gearing up for round two, possibly round three. There may be folks even looking to the future. So I'd love to hear a couple of folks in the chat on what your dream MBA program is and when you're planning on applying. So let's see who our brave souls will be. Awesome. Okay, looks like there's Stanford applying in fall 2026, Columbia in round two. All right, keep it going. We're going to move on, but this is super helpful for our panelists to understand kind of what schools you're targeting, and we can talk specifically about some of these schools. While those answers are coming in, I'm going to give a brief overview of Leland. So we have three business lines here at Leland. The first is one-on-one coaching. As I've mentioned a number of times, each of our three panelists do this one-on-one coaching. They'll meet with you. They'll help with your essays, with your interview prep, make sure that you are fully prepared to put your best foot forward for the MBA admissions cycle. We also have live cohort-based classes, whether it's preparing for the GRE or MBA boot camps, where you can go in with a class of about 20 to 30 people and learn in a group setting. And lastly, we have Leland Plus, which is our content library, which has a ton of fantastic resources, specifically a lot of resources about preparing for interviews. So encourage you to check out all of these different offerings that we have on the platform. And like I said, our goal is to make sure that you achieve your goals. So you can see there's a variety of folks that get into their dream schools, land their dream jobs, all through our Leland coaches. Okay, a couple of things. You can book a free strategy call if you're interested by scanning the QR code here on the screen, and I'll give everyone a second to do that if you are interested, and we'll also be placing the link in the chat. If you're not sure where to start and you're a little overwhelmed with the process, we have a lot of folks who can help. And without further ado, we're going to get into the meat of today and do our panel. So we're going to be bouncing the questions around to all of our different panelists, but this first question is going to go to all of our panelists. So for all of our panelists, when you think back on the best MBA interviews you've seen or coached, what stood out about that candidate that made them truly memorable? Kelsey, I'm going to start with you and we'll work backwards in order.
Fabulous. The best interviews I personally conducted were ones that felt like I was having a cup of coffee with someone, that it wasn't an MBA interview, but it was that I walked away really truly understanding what kind of student they would be at Columbia or now coaching folks at any particular school. Then I learned something about them that I didn't read in their application, that the interview just wasn't a rehash of everything I'd already read.
Awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. It's always nice to learn something new from the interview. Mike, any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, when I looked at this question, one particular interview came to mind, and it was a guy who, at some level, he sort of pulled a trick, I would say, out of his hat. He had connected, looked at my LinkedIn profile and identified a few people that we knew in common that were both of our networks, and basically the first 10 minutes of the conversation was really about that, and sort of connecting some of the people that we both knew. He shared some stories, and as Kelsey said, it like revealed something that wasn't in his application or in his resume. And it just started a rapport that I found, even at the same time that I was thinking to myself, like, hey, I'm sure this is kind of strategic and this is probably something that he does with a number of people that he meets with. I also just recognized that there was genuine curiosity there. And that was the thing that really stood out to me, is that if you go into an interview genuinely interested and wanting to learn something from the person that you're interviewing with, not just as a ploy or a strategy, but with that genuine interest, I think it comes across in a way that leaves a really positive first impression.
Absolutely. Yeah. Doing your research is incredibly important, and being yourself in a lot of ways. They want to get to know you as a person. Christine, I'll hand it over to you.
I don't know that I have anything all that different to add. Just maybe just the general authenticity that people bring to it. Not taking yourself too seriously, like Kelsey said, like making it feel like more of a coffee chat. When people come in and they are their true selves and they really have thought about this process and understand why they want that particular school, it comes through. There's no secret sauce to this in many ways. It's really just being yourself. And the most important part of it is truly doing the work to know yourself and taking the time to self-reflect and, walking through with somebody what your story is and the important pieces, and really being attentive to the questions they're asking. And instead of pushing your own agenda, making sure you're getting across what things are important that school should know about you for their culture.
Well, we have a question on this in a little bit, but it's about storytelling, right? Like Christine said, making sure that you're showing folks who you are and kind of why you're interested in going to an MBA program, and very specifically that particular MBA program. Thanks so much. All right. For our next question, we're going to ask, what qualities are these MBA programs, so specifically M7 top programs, trying to uncover in the interview, and how can applicants best demonstrate them? Mike, I'll pass this one to you first.
I sometimes, I was responsible for training people at Stanford to conduct interviews, and so we'd walk through, essentially some guidelines and what we were looking for. But what I always found underneath all of it, it's creating a positive first impression. I mean, that is what interviews essentially can evaluate. There's a lot of things that interviews are bad for, for using an interview to determine if someone's actually going to be good at a job, like notoriously bad. It's there's lots of research that says that is not the best way to use an interview. You have to understand like what you can and cannot get from an interview. But ultimately, if you think about what business schools need, a core competency of an MBA student for the 2 years that they're in a program is creating a positive first impression. If you think about every classmate you're going to meet, every faculty member, every alum, every guest speaker, you're going to create a positive impression that is going to affect the brand of that school in a small way over the course of 2 years. And so ultimately, that is really what you're trying to do in an interview. I'll stop there, and there are lots of details that we could get into, but I'm sure my colleagues have some good additions as well.
Absolutely. Christine or Kelsey, anything you want to add to Mike's comments about creating a first impression or anything else about this question in particular?
I have a tip on what Mike just said. A really easy way to do that in the first 10 seconds is when you log on, there's going to be a little small chat, right? Hi, how are you? If you say good and just sort of blank out, that kind of sets a tone. But if you say, I'm really great, it's a sunny day here in Charlotte, North Carolina, like have a little bit of personality there or, try to dig in there. I think just to add on to also what Mike said is that, I think that there's really four things. Are you the same person who wrote your essays? Are you showing up with that same ethos? Are you being consistent? Are you saying that your goals are the same thing? Or did you just flip things? There were times where somebody said, I want to go into investment banking, and all of a sudden they're talking about private equity. They're very different things. The other thing is, are you well researched on that school? Almost all schools will ask you about, why that school. And if you have a vague answer, it's clear that, that school is not your top choice. And then finally, some sort of like leadership. And leadership can be big or small, but the tell me about a time or the walk me through your resume, are you demonstrating that you are differentiated from your peers in some way?
I think that's fantastic. And Christine, I'm actually going to pass a question from the chat to you because I think it dovetails really nicely with what Kelsey was saying. But someone is asking for the interview, are you assessing how well the student fits into the school's vision or theme, right? And how can someone kind of do the research and prepare to answer questions or that assessment?
I mean, I think that depends on the school, but by and large, the answer would be yes. We want to, welcome people into our programs that are a really good culture fit, that understand what they're going to be getting out of the program, that see where our strengths are and where they're going to fit into that. So yes, they're looking for that, but it's not the plan of square pegs into round holes trying to sort of force you into there. The most robust and interesting classes come with a great depth of diversity. So, just because you might want to apply to Wharton and they're known as a finance school doesn't mean that if you're into marketing, you can't apply to Wharton and get a great education out of it. So it really, trying to position yourself to do well within that program and to demonstrate to them that you're a good fit has everything to do with their culture as much as it has to do with whatever their program offerings are. So look beyond the low-hanging fruit of they're really good in finance and they have a really good, family business center or whatever it is that you're thinking about schools, and go to who are the people in this program? What faculty research is happening? What kinds of new companies have come out of this, whatever, new venture challenge at Booth, or what kind of, developments and new majors have been happening at this program. Like those are the things that you should be looking at. Business schools are very, they're alive and growing all the time. And so, kind of figuring out where you fit with that is important and not forcing it. I mean, if it's not the right school for you, it's not the right school for you. So knowing that it's the right one such that you applied should really come through in the interview and be pretty seamless.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see folks make when they're both writing their essays and preparing their application, but also in the interview, is trying to answer in order to appease the person on the other side rather than something that's genuine. Christine, it sounds like you're saying like answer truthfully, right? Make sure it's genuine, make sure that it's your story versus saying, "Hey, I want to go into finance because you know that school may have a robust finance program." If that's not for you, it's not for you. Awesome. Thanks so much. For our next question, how can applicants prepare effectively for both behavioral questions and resume-based interview formats? Kelsey, I'll go ahead and start with you on this question, if that's okay.
I mean, there's a couple tactical things that I think are helpful, right? Review your application. Almost every school is going to ask you what your goals are. You wrote it before, review that again. Review your resume, review the application details that you put in because you put things in like activities, you put things in like extracurriculars. And so know those things really well. I think one thing folks get subsumed by is, oh my gosh, this is an MBA interview. And they stop and forget that they know everything already. You've lived it. That also really dovetails into the both behavioral things. I mean, look, you're only going to receive, between, even if you get one at all, one, and I recently saw five come through an interview, but if you pick stories that are, very big pillars of you, a time where you failed, a time where you did well, a time where you worked with a difficult person, and you build off of those things, investigate those situations. And oftentimes, a situation can serve multiple purposes. Maybe your biggest accomplishment, you still made a mistake. And so you have to walk through those. I think finally, rehearse them. You have three wonderful coaches here. And there's other coaches here on Leland that are really experts in those things, but you can also record yourself. I know it feels a little silly, it feels a little stodgy, but practice. You are not supposed to make a speech in any one of these answers. And so if you're going after 60 seconds by any of these, you're not being succinct. So I think those are my best tips for how to prepare for both sides.
I think those are fantastic. When I was preparing for MBA interviews, I lived in a decently remote area and I would actually just go walking and force myself to say things out loud. And it
Yeah.
helped so much. I know it's so awkward, but actually just speaking it is so important. Mike, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question that we have in the chat. Someone asked, how does an MBA interview differ from, say, a job interview? Could you walk us through kind of what the biggest differences between those two type of interviews may be?
Sure. I mean, at some level, you're interviewing for the job of being an MBA student at that school, right? And so, if you think about, I mean, if you actually give some careful thought to what does that job description look like, right? They want you to be an exceptional student. They want you to make contributions to the academic learning community that they're trying to create. Um, they're looking for people that are going to add to the community, the sense of that are going to be able to contribute to their cohort, but also be great learners. People that are going to demonstrate curiosity. I mean, each of these small behaviors, in a sense, really contributes to the overall the mission essentially of the school. And so if you think about those as being, in a sense, like the job description of being a student, I think at that level, you can start to think of it a little bit more like a job interview. Obviously, the school is not, you're not interviewing to, get paid essentially and, take on the job responsibilities, have direct reports and such. And so, there's going to be differences there, but they are looking for, a set of people that they think are really going to perform the job of being a student, really well. I took that very seriously at Stanford. Essentially, I wasn't just looking for the people that I thought were, the coolest people, but you wanted a sense that, hey, this person is going to take their academics seriously. They're going to take the learning of their classmates seriously. They're going to take essentially the culture and the mission of the school seriously, and they're going to contribute to that.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way to think about it. Your job is going to be being a student, full-time, part-time, evening, weekend, whatever that may look like, kind of trying to convince that interviewer that you can do that. Christine, any thoughts on these questions?
No, I feel like they were pretty thorough and covered it. I think probably the maybe only tiny piece I would add is stand in front of the mirror and look at yourself because as much as you can say the things out loud, if you don't actually see what you look like and you look scared or you're sweating or you're like, especially when you're on a Zoom and you can only see like this part up, like you look frozen, you want to look engaged. This is business school. If you find it difficult to talk to someone face to face, you're going to struggle. Because you're going to be in a job where you're going to have to maybe fire someone or you're going to have to give somebody feedback. So consider how you're coming across face to face and look in the mirror or record yourself even, which I know sounds stressful, but it's really not that bad. You're all on Instagram anyway. So
There's lots of recording happening. And yes, I feel like for MBA interviews, the time old principle of practice makes perfect really, really, really is actually very key here. For our next question, I kind of previewed this one a little bit, but what role does storytelling play in the interview process, and how do you strike the right balance between personal and professional stories? Christine, I'd love to start with you on this one, if that's okay.
Sure. So I think the key piece here is go back to the prompt. Always go back to the prompt and make sure you're answering the question. Because if the school is asking you what's the biggest commitment you've made or what makes you unique, that could be covering just about anything. If they're asking you, how did you arrive at your career interests? Maybe it has some personal elements, but it might only have professional elements. So I feel like my colleagues will probably agree that most often the biggest trip ups are not answering the question or answering a question that wasn't asked, i.e., you know, trying to shove in somebody else's answer to your prompt. You want to really think about when you're kind of doing that in your interview, taking the same approach, right? What is the question they've asked you? Try to really focus on what's the crux of what they're trying to get at. And 9 times out of 10, the school is really focusing on here's what our culture is, here's what we really value. So if they're asking you a question about, what kind of contribution you've made on a team, then they're really interested in understanding your role in the team. If your entire answer is I, you haven't really demonstrated that you're participating in a team capacity in a way that's collaborative. Same thing with the essays, right? What is the prompt? What is the question? Really think about what they're asking. And if it's a multi-pronged question and you miss a piece, go back and say, I think there was a piece I missed. Could you remind me what that second part was? It's okay to do that. We know you're human, and as a very good colleague of mine likes to say, we're not monsters. We actually really want you on the school side to do well in this process. We're, rooting for you. So, do the best you can to make yourself as human as possible. And if you miss a piece of the question, ask for clarification on it or ask what piece you missed. And remember, they're trying to figure out how you fit with their culture and whether the story you've shared is really something that's going to be additive to their community.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic. And a tip I got before interviews, I had all of my interviews on Zoom, so it may differ depending on your format, but someone said, hey, it's okay to have a piece of paper next to you. And as they're asking the question, just write down the key word of the question, right? So if they're saying, hey, tell me about a time where you overcame a challenge, just write down challenge. And therefore, right next to you, you have a reminder of what the question actually was, and you can make sure that you're answering it. Kelsey or Mike, anything to add about kind of storytelling and then the balance between professional and personal stories during the interview?
Storytelling, in my view, is a huge part, one of the most important parts of this entire thing. Whether a school is known for its case-based or its labs or, traditional instruction, you're going to be talking a lot, right? And if you can't distill, walk me through a resume, tell me about a time. If you can't distill that in a reasonable amount of time, one, well, that's a red flag, right? How can you communicate? But really, two, being able to have an interview, ideally, it's kind of a back and forth. It's a conversation, right? And if you're sitting there and your answer takes up 5 minutes, well, most interviews are about 30 minutes. That's a pretty significant chunk. And so I would say synthesized storytelling is a huge thing. And it doesn't come naturally to all of us, right? And so I think now, and by now, maybe some of you on this panel have already been invited to interview. Maybe some of you are still waiting. Practice it in your everyday life, at work, in your personal life. Try to be as crisp as possible.
Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. Mike, I saw you come off mute as well. Anything to add here?
I would just add very briefly, a few people have said like record yourself on video. I think that is an important preparation technique, not only because not so much that you get to see yourself, but the actual process of speaking and knowing that you're being recorded kind of gets your mind in a similar place to where you can be in an interview, which feels a little bit under pressure. Because I do see people often they'll start in storytelling and start a chronological story and they get kind of lost in it and they end up going on much longer than really would be recommended. And so once you have a little bit more practice doing that as you're being recorded, you start to your brain starts to adjust a little bit. You start to get into that mode where you can kind of get through things a little bit more quickly or focus on thematic ideas as opposed to and then this happened and then this happened and then this happened, because that type of storytelling can put someone to sleep, and you want to make sure that you're as practiced as possible and feel comfortable, and adjust your tone of voice and cadence to really build that rapport that you're trying to develop.
I think that's crucially important. And if you're anything like me, when you get a little bit nervous, you tend to talk very, very quickly. So practicing can help you kind of slow down. Like Mike said, you'll get a feel for what maybe is too long of an answer or when you start rambling. So, yes, totally agree. Awesome. We have one more question before we're going to take a quick intermission. But for all three of our panelists, how would you recommend structuring answers to common questions like walk me through your resume or why an MBA now? This could be everything from length to kind of how you walk through your story. Mike, let's start with you and then I'll pass it around.
So these are both questions that I think you want to have a prepared answer for. You want to have rehearsed it enough times that you know the script. You don't have to sort of think in the moment about how you want to answer it, and you can be present in the moment and just really speak to the answers. Again, I really discourage you from if someone says walk me through your resume, I almost feel like it's a trap. You start to kind of going to the beginning. Well, I went to school here, and then I had this job, and then I went to that job. And that type of storytelling, first of all, can be a little bit boring. And secondly, I just find that it often traps people where they go on too long. They start to get nervous, they talk faster, and it doesn't go over well. I try to encourage clients to come up with 2 or 3 points that they want to make. Here's the things that you need to know about me, this, and this. Start, frame it, so then you can walk through those things. And even if you end up sort of cutting short something because you feel like you're going on a little bit too long, you've given that framing in a way that prepares someone for what you're going to say, and allows you to kind of speed it up or slow it down as you need to. Really, and same thing with the other 2 questions that you need to be prepared for are why an MBA now, or why this school, and what are your goals after you get an MBA. So those are 3 questions. Some background, why you want an MBA, what you want to do after an MBA, that almost universally are going to come up in some form or fashion in an interview, and you have to be really prepared to address those crisply. I would say in each case, you want to have something where you've got 2 or 3 points that you want to make, ideas. It's like a thesis. And don't go through like a long, sort of arc of sort of a chronological story.
Absolutely, totally agree. Christine, I'll pass it to you. Any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I think what I would add is that this type of open-ended question is a gift in the interview process, because while some schools have really pat questions they might want to ask, and others, you're allowed to kind of do whatever you want, this one is probably, or one like this is probably the most open-ended you're going to get. And it gives you the opportunity to take a little bit of control over the situation of what sort of details you're going to give them. So to Mike's point about like have some things prepared, consider what it is you want their takeaway to be about you, right? Is it important that they know that you grew up you're a first generation low income person? Is it important that they know that, you're the first person in your family to chart a certain career path? Those kinds of things. Dip some of those things in there with intentionality around how it fits into your story, because those are going to be things that differentiate you, not for the purpose of just saying, look at me, I'm different, but because those things are valuable to what your experience has been. So in doing those kinds of, answering those kinds of questions, think about what are the important highlights they should know about me, like Mike said, but also who am I as a person that I'm coming to this, that I'd really like them to walk away knowing what I've done and who I am.
Absolutely. Kelsey, we'll round it out with you.
It's been excellently covered by Mike and Christine. I think the only thing I'll add for the why MBA now, you have to have a little bit of wherewithal within yourself when you're interviewing, right? Most interviews are blind. They have your resume. They haven't read your whole essays. And so why MBA now, in my view, is secretly kind of a goals question, but they don't know that, right? So you have to say, okay, they don't know anything about me. Hit pause, say, I'm going to back up and give you a little bit of context about my goals. And just like Mike said, have the thing. I am the world's best, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But have that synthesis and then walk through it. And I think that really goes for a lot of questions. You got to know most are blind. And if they are blind, know when to hit pause, say, you know what, I'm going to back up and give you a little bit of more context to fully answer this for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you so much, coaches. We're going to take a brief intermission for just 2 slides, and then we're going to jump right back into the questions. If you missed it at the beginning, we are doing a giveaway for $50 in Leland credit. You can enter by going to this bit.ly link or scanning the QR code there. So I will give you just a second to do so. And I love seeing all the questions in the chat. Really appreciate you posting those. So keep those coming. We'll answer some of them live. We'll also answer some of them asynchronously as well. And then our second intermission slide, like I mentioned, we have folks on the Leland team that are here to help. If you want coaching, but you're really unsure where to start or what a coach can actually help you with, you can hop on the phone with a member of our team and chat through your goals, and they can walk you through coaches that are great fits for you, what exactly that coach can do, really help kind of demystify the process. So if you're interested in that, you can either click on the link in the chat or you can scan the QR code here. We'll give you just a second to do that. And then without further ado, we will jump right back into our questions. Really appreciate all of our panelists just helping us plow through these. So this question, how can applicants show confidence without coming across as arrogant? We talked a lot about practice, which I'm sure is a really big piece in this. Any of our panelists have any other tips and tricks on striking this balance of selling yourself, but not coming off as arrogant?
I would say two quick things. One is express genuine interest or curiosity in your interviewer, and that takes a little bit of homework. Hopefully, you know something about them before you show up. Second, I encourage clients to think about someone that they really enjoy talking to, someone who they feel comfortable brings out some of the best of them, and try to in a sense project some of those characteristics on your interviewer. So in a sense, kind of imagine yourself talking to someone who you just find, sort of compelling and have had really good conversations with in the past. And sometimes that helps to kind of create a little bit of that energy where you come across as engaging, partly because you find them engaging.
Absolutely. Imitation is honestly the sincerest form of flattery. So I think that's a great idea. Christine, I saw you come off mute too. Any thoughts here?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm happy to add, but I just wasn't sure if anybody was going to jump in. I think probably I was also laughing a little bit. I think that the key piece is, inevitably, if everything you're saying is, I did this and I did that and I did this, it probably is going to be a little bit arrogant. So throw in words like, I've been really fortunate to have the opportunity to, I, really, attempted to take this great opportunity that was in front of me. I was so grateful to have the chance, consider how it would feel if the words were coming towards you if you were saying I all the time. The irony is that most people that are arrogant actually don't even realize they are.
Totally fair. And I think another thing, we talked about this a little bit earlier, if you get a question about working on a team, but you end up saying I a lot, right? That isn't actually answering the question. Make sure you pull in kind of your team members that you worked with in many of your jobs, whether a traditional corporate job or a non-traditional role, you probably worked in a team, and it's okay to highlight kind of how you gelled together and worked on a team to achieve a goal. Okay, for our next question, Kelsey, I'll go ahead and start with you. But what are the biggest mistakes you've seen strong candidates make in their interview? And someone actually had this question in the chat in terms of we talked about synthesis, making sure that your answers are concise. What are the other big pitfalls that folks should make sure that they avoid?
Oh man, could write a small book on this. I'm sure we absolutely all could. I think one of the main ones is that, no, I'm going to go through a couple really fast, actually. I just have so much to share. So, one, not good prep work, right? Kind of building off of what Mike said. They're not writing down maybe the 2 or 3 things that, they want their interviewer to know, things that are important to them, challenges, maybe something you wrote in your essay. And if you're not able to convey those in the interview, are you showing your whole self? Secondarily, this might seem silly, not being on time or not following directions. Some of these schools say, send your resume. I can't tell you how many times again and again. I'll tell my clients to do it and they still don't do it. You absolutely have to. It's really the one thing that will count somebody out. Thirdly, I think folks being overly nervous that they just can't get outside themselves. The way that I prep my own clients is maybe get on a FaceTime call with somebody that you love. And so you're in that mode of kind of connecting. The only mistake, in my sincere belief, is that you are too nervous that you can't let your personality come out and you're just like very stodgy, which prevents you from taking a little bit control of your interview and maybe clarifying a question or saying, back to what I said earlier, back up, I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I think all those things combined can really snowball in and you might end it. But here's what I'll say. You can have a really bad interview and still be admitted. You can have a really good interview and not be admitted. It's not a job interview, but I think the things that I've said here, and I know that Christine and Mike will share too, they're ways to make you feel more confident rolling into the interview.
Absolutely. Mike, anything to add?
Sorry, I was what I would add to that is someone who comes across as not very self-aware, essentially bragging without having any calibration of that. And then one other piece is someone who comes across as ingenuine, and have had people where, you get to a stage of the interview and you ask the person being interviewed, hey, do you have any questions that I can answer? And when the question coming back feels so scripted, and I can just tell that it's actually not a question that they really have any interest in the answer of, but they think that somehow it's a question that they're supposed to answer or ask, or that it's going to impress me that they ask it. That level of what feels like insincerity can be a real miss.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Christine, go ahead.
I think one last thing I would say is particularly related to Zoom interviews. Under no circumstances should you be using AI at all, at all, at all. We can tell when you're reading, we can tell when you're looking at notes on the side. Come prepared. There is nothing that will be the kiss of death worse than being able to tell that you're reading. That includes video questions too. We can tell that you're reading. We can tell that you've used AI. It is not natural. And just a funny story, the biggest mistake I ever saw somebody make in an interview was having an amazing application, totally crushing the interview, and leaving their phone on the seat next to them while they recorded the entire interview.
Oh, no.
Don't do that. That was a straight deny. So
Yep, absolutely.
don't
And
do
and
that.
and Christina, it sounds like with your answer, it's going back to being yourself and being genuine, right? AI does not understand your personality. And so if you're relying on AI to write your essays or help you through your interviews, that's not the right way to go, right? They want to understand you as a person.
Indeed.
All right, for our next question, this is one that we get a lot as coaches. How should folks prepare for less traditional interview types, whether it's a team-based interview or a case style interview? Mike, I'll start with you and then we'll roll through our other panelists as well.
I would just encourage you, similar to the idea of recording yourself on video, is whatever the format is, do your best to do some role play or some prep in that format. Certainly, obviously, working with coaches on platforms like Leland, they can help with that. In some cases, you may need to bring in a colleague or two or a friend who can help you with the preparation. But it's a little bit like I mean, if you're on a team sport, there's no way to prepare better than actual practice and scrimmages that really mimic the sort of the realities of the real time competition. And so, for team-based interviews or similar or like simulation type situations, if you can create essentially a mock interview or a session that mimics that, you will learn so much more in that whatever 30 minutes that you're doing that than reading a whole series of documents or talking to an expert who's going to give you a guide. It's like your body is learning as you're going through it.
Absolutely. Christine, I'll pass this one to you and adding a little bit of an extra question. What schools have these kind of non-traditional approaches and are they becoming more common as time goes on?
So to be very specific about some of them, team-based discussions is Wharton, and truly the best way to do that is to get in a group and do it. It is an incredibly fast-moving 35 minutes. I've hosted these team-based discussion sessions year after year after year, and fortunately, I've had clients with incredible success with it. The ones who are like, "No, I'm good," because they don't want to spend the money, find themselves up against an, "Oh my gosh, that was so hard. Case style interviews, you get a little bit of that in some cases with every school, depending on what they're going to do. But typical case, like, how many whatever golf balls would fit into a 747, not all that common. London Business School, actually, one of the programs I worked for, they do a sort of a mini case style where you're given an example, whatever, here's the marketing team that wants to solve XYZ problem for such and such a company. What would your approach be? They actually give you 5 minutes to think about it, and then you do a presentation that takes between 2 and 5 minutes. And then, like, Harvard will rapid fire do questions, which is very jarring for people. And that's because their case method of learning is very, cold call kind of response. So you'll get a lot of that from their kind of interview, but it's not as much of the sort of how many golf balls are you going to fit in a plane kind of example, like you get in a consulting interview. And everybody does a bit of behavioral element in varying levels of deep dive and not, I'll ask my colleagues to maybe weigh in on if I'm missing anybody that like makes it all behavioral. But yeah, I think being mentally prepared for how to engage is important, particularly with team-based discussion. The idea is not to be heard the most. It is to make sure that what you're saying is intentional and purposeful.
Thanks so much, Christine. Kelsey, anything you would add here on preparing on kind of the different types of interviews that you may encounter?
I think one thing just is, and it's been really well covered, just to add something a little bit different, maybe, every year I work with a couple clients who are maybe a little bit more reserved or shy, and they say, especially with Wharton's team-based discussion, they freak out. They say, how on earth am I going to do this? Wharton admits all types of people, all business schools do. And it's really how are you playing amongst things? Like, what are your strengths, really? And the thing that I tell them is everything you've done up until today, that's been your training, right? The most that you can do is prepare a really good pitch and show up and try to have fun. Of course, with practice along the way, but it's not like you have to show up and be a different person. None of these schools are looking you to fit an archetype in order to get admitted.
Absolutely. Again, going back, being yourself. Okay, we have one last question for our panelists, which I will flash up on the screen, but then we're going to go to the next screen, which will link you to all of their coaching profiles. As I've mentioned before, each of these three folks have been on admissions committees or are currently on admissions committees. They are fantastic people to meet with, to book coaching with, really to be able to prepare for your interviews or to help with your MBA application holistically. So, our final question before I flip screens is going to be, if you had one final piece of advice for someone preparing for MBA interviews, what would it be? We'll start with Christine, we'll go to Mike, and then Kelsey, we're going to wrap up with you. So, Christine, go ahead and take it away.
I think I would say be yourself because I've said that enough times and I'm keeping on brand. And I think probably the only other piece I would say is make sure that when you go into this interview that you feel like you are coming in prepared to share the best things about yourself and know that they could ask you completely different questions that may not ever touch on those things, and you still have to answer the questions that they're asking you.
Absolutely love the advice. Mike, over to you.
So if I only had one piece of advice, it's be excited about essentially going to the school, that you're really enthusiastic about the opportunity. That means you're going to do the prep work necessary. And I remember doing an important presentation, and a mentor of mine at Stanford told me, at the end of this presentation, is people are walking out the room, you want them thinking to themselves, like, I may not remember all the details of what was presented, but man, that guy was really excited about what he's presenting. And so you want, people to feel the energy, the enthusiasm that you have for the school, for the program. And obviously that's going to come through with the prep work that you do, and, the interest that you are able to connect, between your own story and background and what, you believe the school's interests and philosophy is. And that's where the match comes from.
Absolutely. All right, Kelsey, we'll round it out with you.
Try to have fun with this, right? If you are invited to interview the admissions committee, at least two people have said this person can have a spot here. And so know that you are one step closer. Look at your application. You are an expert on you. This is not trying to gotcha or trick you. Anyone interviewing you, current student, alum, admissions, they're rooting for you. So please don't go in there saying, oh gosh, they're going to see how smart I am or how not smart I am or whatever that is. try to have fun, look forward to the conversation, kind of like what Mike said, because the more enthusiasm, the more confidence, you've probably had coffee chats before. This is just another conversation. But if you can stroll in and share something about you that maybe otherwise they wouldn't know, you're going to do just fine.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all our panelists and to Kelsey for rounding us out. All right, just a couple of final things. We're going to announce our giveaway winner, which is Eneyayo Oebolu. We will be sending you an email. Congratulations. You get $50 for coaching credit on Leland to spend in any way you want. So congratulations again. And then lastly, we'll leave you with this. We have events for Thursday and Friday, all about the MBA process, everything from interviews to essays to applications. So go ahead and join us for the rest of MBA Sprint Week. You can always get coaching, and here's that QR code to set up a call with our team if you don't know where to start. With that, we will let you go on this fine Wednesday. I hope that everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you again to our panelists, and best of luck with your interviews and all of your future endeavors. Bye, folks. It was great to see you.